My name is Nicholas, but all my friends call me Nick. I was born in London, and now I live in New York City.
What do you do?
I run People's Television. It's a video production company based in New York City and Washington, D.C. We make animations, documentaries, commercials, and even feature films.
Do you like living in New York?
I love living in New York City. A lot of people think it's too crowded, or it's too busy, or it's too stressful. But for me, I think it's just the energy of the place is something I really love. First, it's great because my friends, my family are all here because I grew up here. But also there's so much happening culturally. There's always music going on, always films happening. All of my friends live here because I went to high school and junior high school here in New York City. What I love most about New York City is all of the different cultures, communities, and ethnicities that are here.
People who live in New York, known as New Yorkers, have a reputation for being impatient and rather bad-tempered. But this is just a stereotype. Most, like Nick, are hard-working and ambitious. What do you like about your New York neighbors?
People here are always really passionate about what they're doing, whether it's their business or their art or their job. And I love the energy that the city has.
New York is an enormous and exciting city with a population of over 8 million people. Many parts of New York are modern, crowded, and noisy. But there are also older, quieter areas that are home to lots of artists and creative young people like Nick. Which part of the city do you live in?
I live in Soho in Lower Manhattan in New York City, and I love my neighborhood because it's so full of history. A lot of the buildings are over 100 years old, and they were factories. And the building that I live in is an old factory that was turned into apartments.
Nick's apartment is great. It's on the second floor, and it's pretty big and quiet. It's the perfect place for him to relax. Nick enjoys practicing yoga in his free time. And the apartment is very convenient too. It's only a 10-minute cycle ride from his office. New York is a city famous for its cosmopolitan population. It's a city of optimistic immigrants. People who came from around the world in search of new lives. And Nick's family is no exception. So, where does your family come from?
So I have a really interesting family background. My mother's side of the family is from India, from Calcutta, which is in the east part of India. And my father's side of the family is from Europe, from what is now Belarus.
Nick's father's family came to New York to escape the Second World War, like many other European immigrants. But his mother's family story is very unusual.
So my grandfather came from India in the 1930s, which was very unusual. There weren't a lot of Indian people here in New York City at that time. Now there are a lot. And he was a blind professor.
Nick's grandmother was a New Yorker. She lived in an area of the city called the Bronx. So how did she meet a blind professor from India in this city of millions of people?
My grandmother was from the Bronx, and the story is that because he was blind, he was having trouble crossing the street, and she helped him out. And they crossed the street together, fell in love, and then they went from New York City to India and got married in the 1940s.
Nick's grandparents returned to New York from India, and both of his parents were born in the city.
My mother and my father met here in New York City. So I'm part Indian and part Eastern European.
Who do you look like?
Everybody says that I look just like my mom and that my brother looks just like my dad. I have the same skin color, hair color, eye color as my mom, and my brother has the same skin color, hair color, and eye color as my dad. So some people think we look alike. I think we couldn't look more different.
Are you still close to your family today?
I'm really close with my brother. I like to stay in touch with him, even though he lives in Germany. So we Skype or FaceTime or video chat almost every day whenever we have time. I'm also lucky that my mom lives right here in New York City, so I'm able to visit her. Sometimes after work, we'll have dinner and hang out. My family loves to travel. Every year, we'll take a trip if we have time. Sometimes we'll go to the Caribbean and go scuba diving, which is awesome. Sometimes we'll go to Europe. My brother lives in Germany, and he's an opera conductor. So we'll go there, visit him, and see his operas. And then when we have time, we go to India, which is where my mother's family is. They're amazing cooks, and we'll eat great Indian food and hang out in Calcutta, which is where her family is from.
Today, Nick is a full-time filmmaker. He owns and runs his own successful video production company. Did your parents influence your choice of career?
So my dad was always a business and numbers guy, but my mother is an artist. She was an opera singer when she was younger, and she loves movies, she loves music, and I think a lot of the artistic spirit that I have comes from her. So I think in some ways what I'm doing is really a perfect mix between my dad and my mom. They were both a big influence on me, and I hope they're proud.
Running your own video production company sounds like a challenging and exhausting business. What's your job like?
I love making movies. I've made movies since I was a little kid, and I'm always looking around and thinking about things that I see and the stories that are out there. And I'm always thinking about how to tell great stories using film. So I will go to location, interview people, work with actors, bring a film crew together that can be camera people, sound people, editors, animators, and I bring the whole team together to try to make the best film possible. As you can imagine, I'm really busy. I'm always doing 10 projects at the same time. I'm often traveling. So sometimes for a video that's only a minute long, we might shoot 10 hours of footage. I just came back from India, Norway, and Seattle doing a global commercial where we filmed for almost 10 days, and the whole thing will be edited into 1 minute.
Although it can be exhausting, Nick's job is never boring. He's got a great team around him, and he is always excited about the next project and the opportunity to tell a brand new story. And the remarkable history of his immigrant family is never very far from Nick's mind when he is working.
A lot of the films that I've made are about the stories of immigrants. They're about people who have come from one country or one culture and moved into another in the hopes of trying to have a better life. And what I'm really interested in is how can movies change the way people think, the way they feel, the way they act? How can films make people more caring about each other, make them see points of view that they weren't familiar with before, and hopefully make the world a little bit better? So our company is called People's TV because we make movies about people that you don't always see on TV.